My name is Ava Reynolds. I am 31 years old and I own a growing cybersecurity company in Seattle. 4 years ago, my family cut me out of their lives. Yesterday, they walked straight into my company like nothing had happened. Then, my mother demanded 50% of it. I smiled, and my answer left them speechless. But before I tell you what I said, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me which country you're watching from. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Most of my team was finishing meetings before the day ended. I was in my office reviewing a report when my assistant Julia knocked on the door. She looked confused. Ava, she said carefully, there are 3 people in the lobby asking for you. Clients? I asked. She shook her head. They said they're your family. For a moment, I just stared at her. My family? I hadn't heard that word in a long time. Who exactly? I asked. Julia hesitated. Your parents and a man who says he's your brother. The room suddenly felt smaller. For years of silence, for years without a call, and now they were sitting in my lobby. I stood up slowly. Send them to the conference room, I said. Julia nodded and left. I walked down the hallway toward the large glass conference room at the center of the office. My employees were working quietly at their desks, unaware that the 3 people who once erased me from their lives were now inside my building. When I reached the door, I paused for a second. Then I pushed it open. My mother, father, and my older brother Daniel were sitting around the table. They looked comfortable, like they belonged there. My father glanced around the room with interest. Nice place, he said when he saw me. Bigger than I expected. My mother gave me a quick smile. Hello, Ava. Daniel leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Not bad for someone who couldn't run a business, he said with a small grin. I stayed near the door. You shouldn't be here, I said calmly. My father waved his hand like that didn't matter. We didn't come all this way to stand in the hallway. Sit down. I didn't move. What do you want? My mother sighed softly. Is that really how you're going to greet us after all this time? I looked at her. You disappeared from my life for 4 years, I said. You don't get to act surprised. Daniel rolled his eyes. Can we skip the drama? He said. We're here for business. That word made my stomach tighten. Business. My father reached into a folder sitting on the table. He pulled out a stack of papers and slid them across the table toward me. The sound of the paper sliding across the glass table echoed in the quiet room. Read that, he said. I didn't pick it up. What is it? My mother answered. A partnership agreement. I frowned. With who? Daniel smiled. With me. I looked from him to the papers. You want a partnership with my company? That's right, he said. My startup and your company will combine resources. It's a perfect opportunity. I laughed softly. You walked into my company uninvited after 4 years to ask for half of it? Daniel leaned forward. Not ask, he said. My mother suddenly pushed the papers harder across the table. They stopped right in front of me. Her voice turned cold. Sign them. I stared at her. What? Sign over 50% of your company to Daniel, she said flatly. For a second, I thought I had heard wrong. Then my father spoke. Your brother's company needs support right now, he explained. If investors see that your business is connected to his, it will stabilize things. I slowly picked up the papers. 50% ownership transfer. My company. The company I had spent years building. You think I'm just going to give him half of this? I asked quietly. Daniel shrugged. You wouldn't have this without the family name anyway. I looked up. Really? My mother leaned closer across the table. Her voice dropped lower. You're going to sign it, she said. Why? She held my eyes for a long moment. Then she spoke the words that explained everything. Because if you don't, she tapped the table with one finger, I'll call your biggest client tonight and tell them exactly what kind of person you really are. Silence filled the room. My largest client was a global company. Losing them would damage my business badly. My father watched my reaction carefully. You built something impressive here, he said calmly, but businesses depend on trust. Daniel smirked. And if your biggest client stops trusting you, he spread his hands, that company of yours won't last very long. I slowly set the papers back on the table. 4 years ago, they called me a failure. 4 years ago, they erased me from their lives. And now they had walked into my office to take half of what I built. For a moment, I didn't say anything. Then I did the last thing they expected. I smiled. "All right," I said quietly. My mother blinked. "What?" I said, "All right," I repeated. "Let's talk about the partnership." Daniel's smirk grew wider. He leaned back in his chair again. "See," he said to my parents, "I told she'd understand." But none of them noticed something important. I wasn't smiling because they had won. I was smiling because I already knew something they didn't, and that knowledge was about to change everything. I looked at the 3 people sitting across from me, my mother, my father, and my older brother, Daniel. For years, 4 years without a call, 4 years without a message, and now they were sitting in my conference room demanding half of my company. My father tapped the papers on the table again. "So," he said, "you understand the situation?" Daniel leaned back in his chair like he already owned the place. "This is actually a great opportunity for you too," he said. "Our companies working together will make both of us stronger." I studied his face for a moment, that same confident smile, the same one he had the night everything fell apart between us. 4 years ago, Daniel and I had actually started a small company together. Back then, it was just an idea, a cybersecurity system I had been building for months. I wrote the code, I designed the software. Daniel handled meetings and investors. At first, everything seemed fine. When people asked about the system, Daniel would introduce me as the technical expert. But slowly, things started changing. Whenever investors praised the idea, Daniel began speaking like the entire project belonged to him. At first, I thought it was just excitement. Then one day, I walked into a meeting early and heard him talking to a group of investors. "This whole system was my concept," Daniel told them confidently. "My sister helped build it, but the vision was mine." I remember standing there frozen. He didn't even realize I was listening. After the meeting, I confronted him in the hallway. "Why did you tell them that?" I asked. He shrugged. "It sounds better." "It's not true," I said. "Relax," he said. "Investors want a clear leader." "That doesn't mean you lie." He rolled his eyes. "Everyone exaggerates a little in business." But the story kept growing. Soon, he wasn't just exaggerating. He was telling everyone the company was completely his idea. And somehow, our parents started believing it too. One night, we all sat in my parents' living room arguing about it. "You're taking credit for my work," I told Daniel. He laughed like the whole thing was ridiculous. "You're overreacting." I turned to my parents. "Tell him he's wrong." But my father just sighed. "Ava, your brother is trying to build a real business. Why are you attacking him?" I stared at him. "Because it's my system." My mother crossed her arms. "Daniel has always been better at business. You should support him instead of competing with him." I felt like the ground disappeared under my feet. "So you believe him?" I asked. My father shook his head like I was being unreasonable. "You're good with computers," he said, "but Daniel understands how the real world works." Daniel leaned back on the couch, smiling. "See," he said, "they get it." Something inside me broke that night. "If that's what you believe," I said quietly, "then I'm done." The next morning, I left the company. I thought maybe after some time my family would realize what really happened. Maybe they would call. Maybe they would ask for my side of the story. They didn't. Weeks passed, then months, then years. No phone calls, no messages, nothing. It was like I had stopped existing to them. So I built my life without them. I worked small freelance jobs, long nights, endless coding. Slowly, I built a new system, a better one. Eventually, that project turned into the company I was running today. And now, the same people who erased me were sitting across from me demanding half of it. I pushed the papers gently back toward them. "If we're going to do this," I said calmly, "we should do it properly." Daniel frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "A partnership between companies isn't something decided in a private conversation." My father looked confused. "Then how is it decided?"
With a formal meeting, I said. My leadership team, senior employees, a few advisors. Daniel thought about that for a second, then he nodded. Fine. My mother was relieved. That's good, she said. If everyone hears about the partnership at the same time, it will look much stronger. Daniel smiled again. Exactly. I stood up from my chair. We're having a company meeting tonight, I said. You can present the partnership there. My father stood as well. Perfect. Daniel picked up the papers from the table. So, tonight we make it official. I walked them toward the office exit. Before stepping into the elevator, Daniel turned back to me. You know, he said with a confident grin, family always wins in the end. I smiled politely. See you tonight. The elevator doors closed, and for the first time since they arrived, I finally allowed my smile to grow wider, because Daniel had just said something very interesting. See you tonight. Not next week, not later. Tonight.